Hello and welcome to Painting with Freehand Lines. Today we'll be painting one of the most memorable skylines in Europe, the skyline of Edinburgh. This view from Carlton Hill. I will be using tube watercolours and I will be using a selection of browns, light to mid, with a dark brown, and that will give me the majority of the background buildings. And the foreground will have a light and mid green, and be using brown to darken that, and that's for the greenery at the base. We'll also be using a Payne's grey, and that can be used to add shadows and a bit of deeper darks to the painting. Starting with the sky, we use a light blue. Quite often I'll use a light blue for the entirety of the side, but sometimes to give a little bit of variance, we'll add a warmer colour. Here I'm adding the yellow ochre, the light brown we just saw in the colour selection. And that's just going to give a little bit of the idea this might be a evening sky. I would really suggest playing with skies and colours. It's very easy to do, and it can really change the pitch of a painting. Starting with the lightest colour is no accident. It allows you to wash over the lines somewhat, because we're going to put darker colours on details later. You don't need to be as careful, and with skies, because you use more water, there's more chance of it running and leaking on the rest of the painting. So you can have a bit more fun with skies. So really do have a go at it. To give the sky a chance to dry, we can turn our attention to the base of the painting. By using an olive green, we can start to fill in the grass bank at the base. And pretty much like the sky, you can have a bit of variation in colour on this. Grass tends to have patches where it's lighter and darker. So starting at the top and then going to the bottom and then filling in the middle is kind of a really nice process to follow. Once that's dried, we can start with the main buildings. So starting the foreground and working backwards, we need a good stone colour. A good stone colour I would suggest is using yellow ochre, a yellowy brown, and adding on to that a bit of burnt umber, which is darker brown. Mixing the two together by using the yellow ochre as mainly the base, and then adding a bit of that burnt umber, which is stronger, until you get the right amount of tone. I tend to use tube watercolours because I can squirt big bits out, and then I can mix them together quite readily with water, and you get a lot of paint. It's usually good to have make up a good amount of paint, so you don't run out and you don't have to mix more and then you get the colours wrong. So that's why I prefer tubes over pans, but pans are great as well. You can see it's very simple. Once you've got enough of the paint, you can just start to fill in all the areas you need to. As we get to the bottom of the Carlton Hill monument, the stone is slightly different. It's more of a granite. So to this paint I've already mixed, I will add a little bit of Payne's Grey, which is a more bluer colour. And then I will start to lather that on, and it's kind of a really nice colour match now, because you can see it's starting to bleed the yellow ochre down, but has a lighter feel and a slightly more blue in its tone. And then at the bottom I'll add even more Payne's Grey, and that will give me the base. Moving towards the background buildings, we'll be using a similar Payne's Grey mix with a little bit of yellow ochre and burnt umber. And that really then is a case of dabbing on and just following the outline of the city. Now that's complete, and to give it some time to dry, we can turn our attention back to the monument. The monument is now going to stand out because of its sandstone kind of look, and this will give a bit more depth. Now I'm using some of that burnt umber and Payne's Grey to just, some of it left over, just to start to give a little bit more depth. Stone tends to have variation in texture, so adding slight tonal differences over the top of stonework in layers will really start to create that depth and detail. You can start to see it now in the actual the monument itself. And we'll do a similar process for the grass now. We've done the olive green, which is quite bright. Now we're mixing olive green with sap green, and that's beginning to darken it. We can add burnt umber, the brown that we've used on the other two colours, to darken it still, and starting to dab that on, and it's starting now to make a richness. And it's this process we will follow throughout the painting. Distant hills. You probably all remember Mona Lisa and the interesting thing of her warm skin and smile against the background of the hills in the distance, and she is a mixture of warm colours, and the hills are a mixture of blue colours, and that's a trick artists use in order to get contrast. And because mountains in distance, there's a blue haze because of the specularity of the atmosphere. So similar detail here. What we tend to do though is keep a little bit of the green we've just used and add a bit of the light blue we use for the sky, and that will really create a really convincing colour for almost like a turquoise for the background. With the base colours done, is a case of adding more of the similar colours on top of similar colours to add darkness and depth. You can see that approach here. So a bit of Payne's grey on the Payne's grey, a bit of yellow ochre on the yellow ochre. You can do this by matching the similar colours, or you can do this by just using actually the Payne's grey with a little bit of the burnt umber to create a more darker colour. Sort of almost a watery black, and using that as well. Both will work quite well, whichever works and suits best. But the idea here is to just get the little details and richness and textural qualities of the stonework, but also to start to think about where the shadows should be. Now moving towards shadows, I'm using here the Payne's grey to really start to get those shadows and start working them up layer by layer. You note that with skylines and detail paintings like this, actually getting lots of little detail into the background really makes the foreground stand out. So just dabbing little bits of darker Payne's grey just to create richness, little windows in the distance, etc., and textural changes, especially with a dark halo around the base of the Carlton Memorial, so it really begins to stand out. Those sort of compositional balances are what makes a great painting. And finally adding the little dark touches, being a bit braver now and adding pure Payne's grey for shadows, deeper shadows around the tops of the capitals and the sides to really get that striking light source from the left, when the sun's always usually on the top left on many of my paintings. And going around now, just finishing those bits off, and then we'll soon have a beautiful complete painting. And there we have it, a really lovely skyline painting of Edinburgh, but with techniques we can use on any skyline. Thanks for painting with me. See you again soon.